When people ask what I do, it's really kind of a fun interaction for me. And I say, oh, I'm a neon tube bender. And while the words that I'm saying, they understand what those are and they know the word neon, it doesn't register putting them together in terms of a job in their mind, so they kind of gloss over and go blank. I have to make the pattern for the neon, which is a full-size rendering in reverse, because we bend all of neon face down on the table so that the front is flat. I don't even look at it like letters. It's all broken down in my mind as like, what bend is this and how do I mark it? And then I put that section of glass in the fire. And then I bring it back to the table when it's hot and lay it down on the pattern to make sure it sets just right. And then I go back in right away to do the next bend that's right next to it. Right as you bend the glass, the outer wall wants to collapse because it's molten. You give a quick puff of air through your blow hose at that moment and it brings the diameter of the glass back to what it was. When you're bending the glass, it's kind of really like by feel. When it's ready, there's not a lot of visual cues. The tactile nature of neon is pretty important. Not only are you handling the smooth, hard glass that turns into a wet noodle when you heat it, but you have wood blocks that you use to cool off the glass, so we can continue working pretty rapidly. We use soft graphite pencils to mark the glass. We use really hard metal files to cut it. You're charring the table and the paper. Every tool that we use is a different touch, and then also the smells. I have the memories of the smelling of a burning pencil from 30 years ago when I was learning. I smell that smell and it's like, ah, yeah, I remember that. When I was in college, I needed a part-time job, and there was a retail neon store that had like palm trees and flamingos and things like that. So basically I babysat the store. And after 2 years of doing that, my boss said, hey, why don't you learn the processing part? And then she said, why don't you go ahead and do an apprenticeship with the tube bender? I was in school full time. I was working 30 plus hours a week, and our glass blower tube bender only worked in the evenings. So I was not really that excited about doing an apprenticeship. It was always like my back pocket trade that I mostly stuck with. I didn't really go on to pursue my studies in cognitive science. There's a very strong element of science behind the process. Neon gases are inert. They need a pure, clean environment inside the tube. Once the tube is bent, we heat up the tube to 250 degrees Celsius with electricity. We burn off all impurities, which includes any like air molecules or dirt. So if those materials that are being used to produce that part are inferior or contaminated with some kind of chemical, it's going to stay in that tube. It's going to corrode and degrade, really, the neon gas molecules. A well-built neon tube, aside from its power supply, but a well-built neon tube can last 10, 20, 30 years. In this shop, I've been here 10 years. I prefer Oakland just because it's an artist community. It used to be way more industrial, way more other people building things, and now slowly these warehouse spaces are being converted to office space. I don't just do stuff for large companies. I do work with several artists in the Bay Area that just want to add neon to something or want something in neon made, and that's pretty interesting because they're always challenging. You have to kind of figure out how to make it work. You know, here's my concept, here's what I envision it to be, and then I have to sit down with it and mentally plot and plan how it's going to come together.